Republicans and Democrats got together and said, hey, listen, the enemy of the enemy is my friend. Neither of us want third-party candidates. So let's take it out of their hands, have it something be that we control, and destroy the third-party candidates forever. And that's truly what happened. I wouldn't vote for a Democrat if it was my mother. Okay, I will tell you that right now. I love my dog. I'm not voting for her if she's a Democrat. She's probably getting kicked out of the House as well. But I do think that both parties created this so that they're setting themselves up for greater success.
Thanks for being with us. As I said, a great show today. By the way, a lot to break down next week. Jill Stein, the former Green Party candidate from 2016 that I always talk about how well they did in states like Michigan, she's back. She's running again. This is good news for us on the Republican side, those who want to see a Republican back in the White House. A big thing. We'll be breaking that down. Plus, today, 7 days until the next government shutdown. Obviously, a lot to break down next week on where that stands because it doesn't stand very well. So we'll break that down. But so much to review that happened this week in politics. I want to kick it off with our good friend, Erin Elmore. Erin, thanks for joining us. Happy Friday to you.
Happy Friday to you. I miss doing the Friday show with you when we did the company quiz every week.
I know. I've got to figure out a way. I know you've said it before, and I agree. I got to find a way to bring that back. But let's just recap the week for now. How's that? We'll just kind of, we'll start with that, and then we'll figure out sometime soon how to bring the quiz in. I want to get, there's a lot of people wetting their pants about how everything went down on Tuesday night. Some rightly so, some not so. What are your takeaways from Tuesday night's elections in terms of what Republicans should care about and not care about?
I feel like there's definitely been a great deal of chatter about this, and I hate to say it, I do think it's the abortion issue. I truly do. I not necessarily the issue itself. It's the way that the Democrats are sort of bastardizing it,
right,
and sort of mobilizing it. They have door knockers in every state where this was basically on the ballot to get out the vote and go to these people's homes, the white, middle-aged, college-educated suburban voter, and say, if you vote Republican, your rights are going to be taken away. And we know that that is not true. It's the way that they are using it to their advantage and mobilizing the troops, whereas we don't have that mobilization on our side as conservatives.
But here's the thing that, and I agree with you, I think it's messaging and mobilization, right? And mechanics, as I always say, like that's the get out the vote stuff. But here's what I don't understand. Why? Republicans, every Republican that's running for office says that they're pro-life, that they wanted Roe v. Wade sent back to the states. The dog caught the car. And then we've kind of been around saying, okay, like, where's our, I'm still at, like, everyone sort of comes to the same conclusion and no one's willing to raise their hand and say, okay, I'll do it.
Well, I think, again, it's messaging. So another M, I don't know if that was one of your M's, but it's that when Roe v. Wade was overturned, it wasn't that no one is going to be able to have bodily autonomy. It was that this is a states' rights issue. And we know the CNNs, the MSNBCs, the New York Times of the world made liberals who are not paying that close attention to the news think that's what was happening.
Right.
And I think the messaging around this is truly the problem. I don't think that that a majority of Americans are completely pro-life. I really don't. I do believe that, and this isn't my opinion, but I think Nikki Haley sort of danced around it pretty well. And I don't want to misquote her, but basically she was like, this is never going to happen. So let's sort of get it off the table politically before we ruin ourselves. And I think that a lot of Americans that are sort of that independent voter are teetering. They say that there's a time frame. Of course, we don't believe in infanticide. And I think that if conservative politicians are only worried about the Christian conservatives, they say, well, they're not going to vote at all. I think that we realize in this world, we are at a really massive impasse, that they would rather vote for someone who is a little bit of a pro-choice Republican than the death to America Democrat.
So, okay, so if you're advising a candidate right now, how would you tell them to properly message on this issue?
I mean, I think it's a really complicated way of looking at it. It's super complicated. I think that you would start by saying this is an issue that we need to have removed from politics. If we believe in bodily autonomy with the vaccine, we really have to start having some tough conversations here. Maybe things like that, because it is one of those issues that if you want the independence, you're not going to be able to say, no abortion at all, or only for the life of the mother, incest, rape, sort of that sort of thing. I personally think that as a party, we need to evolve. And again, this is not necessarily what I think Erin Elmore as a person. I just stay up at night thinking about this. What are we going to do? Because we are not winning elections.
In these crazy times, the economy, the interest rates going nuts, you're probably looking to figure out ways to secure your financial future. And so I would tell you the smartest thing you can do is head over and talk to my friends at Bishop Gold Group. I've known these guys for a while. I trust them. They are America's premier precious metals company. They can help put a plan together for you if you're a first-time investor, if you've been doing this for a while, talk to you about the different opportunities that will give you the confidence to invest, whether it's gold, platinum, silver, whatever. They'll tell you based on your particular needs what's best for you. You can talk to you about converting an IRA, starting from scratch, converting some other securities, whatever it is. Bishop Gold Group is the place that I trust and that I've gotten to know. They can give you a range of options that fit your particular needs. So if you want to give them a call, you can do that at 844-984-1616 or visit bishopgoldgroup.com/Sean, and you'll actually get a little something to start your journey through precious metals. So go to bishopgoldgroup.com/Sean, SEAN, and you will start down a journey that you won't forget. Tell them I sent you. I want to move into that because I feel like that was a topic at the debate. Vivek Ramaswamy and actually Ron DeSantis as well both brought up this losing that's going on.
Yeah.
Now, I believe, look, I've made my bones very obvious in the past about like the party structure serves a purpose. It's to create, it's like a league, right? It's the playing field. It allows the rules and in the infrastructure. Candidates have to run good campaigns. They have to raise money. They have to sell themselves. People aren't going out anymore and saying, I'm just going to vote Republican or there's a lever to push. You're going out and you're saying, I like this candidate. I like that candidate. I'm going to vote for them, or they persuaded me, or I like what they're saying. I mean, kind of what you're saying on abortion, that the candidate needs to message it and make you feel comfortable and make you feel like you understand them. That being said, you saw two of the major candidates, Ramaswamy and DeSantis, bring up this losing. And is it a candidate problem or an infrastructure problem?
It's the RNC problem. I know you're like friendly with all of them and they're good people to many. It's an RNC problem. And that's plain and simple. And that's why people are saying for Ms. Romney, aka Ms., to get out of there,
So this is where, and again, I don't, like I said, I make no bones about it. I've got people that I like and people I don't. As an institution, I do support the party structure because that's what gives ballot access and fundraising capabilities, et cetera, to all candidates. You have an R next to your name, you have access to the tools. What could and should, I mean, if you were saying to Ronna McDaniel right now, like, okay, here's what you need to do aside from step aside, right? What is it that somebody should be going in there and doing?
I mean, unfortunately, at this point, it certainly does seem like the outcry is there and that she probably needs to step down. And we need someone that's a little more in touch with the grassroots America First Trump-esque movement within the party, because it's become that very grassroots, average Joe voter. And those are the candidates that the party wants to see, whereas the RNC might not see that. I think it's properly of choosing where your funds go for the election. I think it's probably understanding who these candidates are and the resources that they need. I know what you're saying about the two-party system, but there's certain things about the two-party system. Yes, we're stuck in this because it benefits both Republicans and Democrats. But I'm old enough to remember when Ross Perot came in and about shook up both the Republicans and Democrats. And I'll educate some of the people watching right now today that the League of Women Voters used to handle the debates. And that was sort of this third-party tertiary organization that allowed the Ross Perots to be right up there with the Republicans and the Democrats. And then after that, Republicans and Democrats got together and said, hey, listen, the enemy of the enemy is my friend. Neither of us want third-party candidates. So let's take it out of their hands, have it something be that we control, and destroy the third-party candidates forever. And that's truly what happened. And I'm a Republican through and through, and I wouldn't vote for a Democrat if it was my mother. Okay, I will tell you that right now. I love my dog. I'm not voting for her if she's a Democrat. She's probably getting kicked out of the house as well. But I do think that both parties created this so that they're setting themselves up for greater success. That might not be the answer.
Well, look, there's no question about it. They want to squeeze out the third party.
Yeah.
And that's why, I mean, I've been talking about ballot access because all of these third party, I mean, RFK, people who get worried about RFK, is Mark Halpern that reminded us a while ago, tell me what ballot RFK is going to be on. I mean, the reality is RFK is going to have a massive ballot access issue.
Yeah.
And for all of the polls that he does well in, if you can't be on a ballot, it doesn't matter. But the reason he can't get on the ballot is because the two major parties have ensured that third party ballot access or independent ballot access is extremely difficult. So that's the problem. That's why I think this Green Party thing is actually an issue that Jill Stein, who ran against Hillary Clinton in 2015, or ran on the Green Party line in 2015 and benefited Hillary Clinton or benefited Donald Trump to the demise of Hillary Clinton, she's back. She's going to run on that line again. That's a big deal. And I think that that's where, but you're right. The Green Party is actually in some states getting kicked off because they haven't gotten enough of the percentage of the vote.
Yeah.
But look, they get it. They want to squeeze out the third party and limit your choices.
Yeah. Definitely. And I think that RFK, when he came on the scene, he was an interesting sort of, maybe we can take Joe Biden out of this race. And now I think, at least in the world that I live and the view that I have, the Trump Republicans, or the, Republicans that initially liked RFK, he's really exposed himself for who he is. And everyone knows that Republicans aren't for RFK anymore. That was a very short-lived sort of, I don't know, this is interesting.
Well,
and now,
as you said earlier, it's the enemy of my enemy. And as long as the guy was running against Biden, it was like, hey, I like that guy. And now that
and now we're like, beat it, geek.
Right. I don't know about you, but I've started to get a little freaked out about all of these things that are going online with your privacy. And there's something that I didn't fully appreciate, but these internet service providers, they follow and track you and legally can sell your information to advertisers. I didn't realize that. I mean, I guess I should have asked, but I have an ExpressVPN on my laptop here, and you can put ExpressVPN on anything, laptop, phone, whatever, right? And it protects you. It's like pulling down the shade so that no one's looking in. It's like, there's a bunch of different analogies we could give you, but you don't want people looking in at you, and you don't want people following you online to know about where you are, what you're doing, your browsing history, gathering data and selling it off. That's what they're doing. So protect yourself. ExpressVPN gives you that sense of security that you need. But it also does something cooler. And I talked about this as we were leading up to Halloween, which is it gives you access to a lot of cool stuff. For example, Netflix has a catalog in every country, which I didn't realize until I got ExpressVPN. What does that mean? It means that if you're watching Netflix in the US, you can see certain movies. If you're watching in Canada, Australia, whatever, you can watch other movies. And that's true with all of these streaming platforms, Disney Plus, et cetera, right? So when you have ExpressVPN, you can trick it and tell your computer that you're in another country. It gives you security, it gives you options. And so it ultimately saves you a ton of money because you take that Netflix account and magnify it so that you don't have to have maybe a ton of streaming services. You could have one and then just fake the computer into other countries and access the catalog of movies from those countries that may not be available here in the US. If you want to have both security and access all this stuff, go to expressvpn.com/Spicer. You'll get 3 months free. So that's a sweet deal. Try it now, get that sense of security, protect your privacy, and also save a ton of money by being able to access and maximize your streaming service. ExpressVPN.com/Spicer for 3 months. I want to go back to the debate though, because I kind of was pulling that thread a second. What did you think? I thought Vivek Ramaswamy, as a guy, I kind of cringed a little when he went after Nikki Haley, right? And I was like, he's talking about the size of her heels and then her daughter, and I was like, I get the point that you're making, Vivek, but like this is probably not endearing you to a lot of female voters, but you are a female voter. So I want to ask you.
Yeah, but I'm not like the typical female voter. I cut my teeth. I cut my teeth at a law firm where I was a young woman with all men, and I've heard and seen a lot worse. Locker room talk is nothing to me. But for me, I thought all's fair in love and war, and this is war. I liked what he said. I think he's quippy. I'm certainly not voting for him. Certainly not an endorsement. But I thought when he said Dick Cheney and heels, those are the sound bites that you get that make news. And I think he was trying to make news, and it worked. And when he talked
that's the thing that I find interesting. You're right. He made news. He was once again the talk of the internet and frankly the morning shows. But it was funny because I had gotten a lot of texts from women that were just like, oh, dude, that was just a little too much. And I get it. Most conservative women aren't the sort of the feminazi, sexist, all worried about their pronouns. But I
No.
think they were like, dude, you could have gone after her on policy, but you're making it gender specific by attacking certain things.
I mean, I certainly understand the argument, although I don't agree with it. And here's the thing: Haley went after him about being on TikTok, and what he said, like, basically what he said was fair. If you're so worried about what I'm doing, clean up your own house. Like,
But here's the difference is I get, like, look, I've been very clear. I have a problem with TikTok. I'm not on it. My kids aren't on it, but my kids are minors, right? I can control what's on their phones. I can tell them. Nikki Haley's daughter, and I'm not defending this because but I'm saying that there's a difference between a minor child who you have a right to say, here's a phone that I am bequeathing you. I am your adult guardian. And a 25-year-old woman, which is what Nikki's daughter is. And I kind of was like, there's a little difference to say you should be able to tell your 25-year-old daughter what to do and what to have on her phone. I think that it should be like, I would love to see parents make that case. I think they should be to all their kids, regardless of how old they are. But my point is, it was a little bit of a cheap shot because it made it sound like, your daughter's on TikTok. Well, she's 25. She's going to do what she wants to do, whether her mother tells her to or not.
Yeah, I think that's fair also. But, he's an adult too.
Yeah. Oh,
But,
but look, I
Yeah.
think that, like, the idea that he's on TikTok is inexcusable. You can't tell me that you are tough on China, that you're concerned about the national security threat that they pose, the intellectual property that they steal, and then say, but I'm going to go on TikTok where that's exactly what they do.
But the problem is young Republican kids are on TikTok, and if he wants to reach that young voter, here's what I would do if I were him. I am going to use this to my advantage to get votes, and then the minute I win, I'm going to shut it down.
Yeah, I get that, but that is it's sort of like, how do you talk about? It's such a transactional thing. That's the Biden campaign. They're saying, yes, TikTok's bad. We're banning it on government phones. It's illegal to use in the military and national security. But then we're going to campaign on it. What signal does that send to a young person who you're trying to say, yes, it's very dangerous. Let me tell you how bad it is. But I'm going to communicate with it. I'm going to communicate by it on you. To me, you can't. If you're a young person, you're like, yeah, I get what you're saying. It's politically expedient, but you can do it and I can't. I mean, I get why.
Well,
it's a
right
tool.
now, I would say everyone, like, when I get in, it'll be gone. I'm going to, then you guys will understand. I am not a fan of Chris Christie. However, I thought that he had a really cogent point on TikTok. He said the Chinese Communist Party doesn't have Instagram or Facebook or X.
Right.
Why are we allowing their platforms? And on the left, they're all saying free speech, but you got to go back to something. This isn't really about free speech. This is a Chinese Communist Party spying app, and they don't allow ours there. So why should we allow theirs here?
I agree. And that's, again,
I like that point.
I love, I thought there were so many good points. They not just that, but the version of TikTok that they have in China is different than the version they have here. I mean, there are so many separate issues to pull down and discuss. And yet I'm actually intrigued. It shows you at the beginning of this Congress, actually probably a little before, there was so much agreement that we had to ban it. We had to do it. And then you saw the lobbyists and the money. And I couldn't believe how many ads TikTok was running during the debate. I mean, these guys get it, which is, all right, politicians, you want to ban us? We'll use our platform to go after you. We'll have our lobbyists. I mean, this is so Washington. It's unbelievable. To me, This is a black and white issue. It's bad for our country. It's a threat to national security. We shouldn't even be debating this thing. And yet these politicians, they're on it. They're not doing anything about it because the system, the swamp, as Trump would like to say, is winning.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's all extremely valid. You even saw that when all of the Sam Bankman-Fried stuff was coming out. Of course, he was funding Democrats, but basically when they were thinking about regulating crypto, he was like, okay, everybody, here's, we're lining your pockets. And then everyone's like, oh, crypto is great. Let's just let it do its own thing. And we saw that he talked to a few Republicans too and donated to a few Republicans too.
Yeah, exactly. It was like, I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen. But at the end of next week, 7 days from today, the government's going to run out of funding again. We got this new speaker, Mike Johnson, who came in. He has all these things. There's not, the Republicans had to pull 2 of the appropriations bills this week that they couldn't move forward. So that was obviously the plan. We want to move these one at a time. We want to do this and jam the Senate. They haven't done anything. And so they're out of session today because it's a Veterans Day observed. They're going to come back Monday and have 5 days before the next shutdown happens. And I feel like this is Groundhog Day, where we're just going to keep kicking the can down the road. Now, I'm actually somewhat of a fan of the CRs in the sense that they actually cut spending because they keep it at levels that are below the new ones so that Washington can't add in new money. And so as much as it kills me that this is how we're doing business, if it ensures that we don't spend additional money, I'm for it. And I think that's the only upside right now. But I feel like everybody wanted to rearrange the chairs on the deck of the Titanic and say, okay, we got a new speaker, we're going to do this. And yet they don't realize the ship still sinks. And that's what's going to happen next Friday.
I mean, I think I look at this through the lens of the average American who doesn't maybe understand how this works in Washington. Where is all of this money going? We have an open border. Gas is still extremely expensive. The grocery store is completely unaffordable. Why are we spending all this money and none of our lives are getting any better?
Right.
Like, and the bureaucracy in Washington is so bloated and it's just really hard to watch. And it almost makes you feel helpless. Like there's nothing we can do about it.
Right.
So that's just where I feel. I mean, I know that's maybe not the answer you're looking for, but it's just really disheartening to see these people spending our money hand over fist, sending it to all of these countries overseas. I'm not even talking about the wars. I'm just talking about, I saw something online the other day. We're sending X million dollars overseas to fund LGBTQIA initiatives. Like, what?
But that's the thing and I ask this every time a member of Congress comes on, right? There are big entitlement programs that need to get reformed if we really want to address the debt and the deficit. Okay, I get that.
Yeah.
I served on the budget committee for 3 years as the spokesman on the House side.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, these low-hanging pieces of fruit, that the grant that you're just talking about, the funding for this and that like every Republican should be like, okay, I'm against that. Why is that? It blows my mind. They control the House. The Constitution gives it the power to originate spending. And yet they all shake their head and say, you're right. It is a shame. And I'm like, but you're the guy or the girl with the vote. Why are you guys sitting back saying, we're just going to let this keep happening? And the one thing
because these bills now, right, they're so big and there's so much pork, right, in these pieces of legislation. And you don't even, they should start itemizing these things, for the average American citizen. But the problem is let's say you don't want to pass X in that bill, and then they'll throw in, well, for your home state, your wife runs the library, Joe Manchin. Maybe we just throw a little funding for the library in West Virginia. So it's basically Washington is the most corrupt place on earth. Our founders would be rolling over in their graves the way that this is running, and we shouldn't have career politicians and all of these special interests. It sort of makes you really upset when you start to peel back the layers of the onion. You really do cry, and not just because it's an onion.
Yeah, I agree. Erin, I appreciate you being with us on this Friday. I hope you enjoy the weekend. I know you're down there in Florida where it is so much warmer and nicer.
It's beautiful today.
So I know. Anyway, thank you. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, Sean. Always a pleasure to see you.
Are you wasting money on testosterone booster products that don't work? I don't blame you if you're getting tired of that. But our sponsor here, Nugenix Total T, can give you some hope because they are now willing to give you a complimentary sample when you text 231-231 and enter the keyword Spicer. That's easy. You're watching the show. You know what I'm talking about. Just go to 231-231 Spicer. Nugenix Total T has a formula of testofen. It will help you turn back the clock and re-energize your whole life. You'll see increased energy, etc. You've got nothing to lose, but a lot to gain. If you don't like it, you just keep the bottle, do what you want with it. If you want to keep going, you can, but you get that complimentary bottle at 231-231 and then enter the keyword Spicer by doing that. It's the #1 doctor recommended brand of testosterone boosting brand at both GNC and Walmart. But if you go there, you got to pay for it. You can text 231-231 Spicer and get a complimentary sample for free. If you don't like it, they'll refund everything. So again, the cool part about this is right now, if you do this, you actually get a complimentary additional bottle of Nugenix Thermo X, which is their newest and most powerful fat burning, incinerating product ever. You have nothing to lose. Text 231-231, enter keyword Spicer, check out Nugenix Total T. You will not be disappointed. Texting enrolls you in automated text messaging. Consent not required to purchase. Message and data rates may apply. #1 doctor recommended brand by primary care physicians based on an independent survey conducted by IQVIA 2022. All right. Well, that set the stage for our next conversation. I want to bring in Alex Plitsas. He is a member of the Special Operations Association of America. He's a board member there, served the country, deployed to Iraq. He was on the White House policy hostage team. A great conversation that I want to have with him about where we are on this Veterans Day, what they're doing, and why our government isn't doing it. I want to bring in Alex. Alex, good to see you again. Thanks for joining us.
Sean, thank you so much for having me. Good to see you again as well.
Yeah. So I know today we're observing Veterans Day, but obviously thanks for your service. Thanks for everything that you guys do over at Special Operations Association of America. It's interesting, you go to your website and you talk about all the stuff that you guys do to support the special operators and the community, et cetera. But you guys have been very active both in Afghanistan and now in Israel, getting Americans out. Can you explain what you're doing and frankly, why you're doing it?
Sure. No, that's entirely accurate. And thank you as well for your service. I mean, I know you've been a Navy officer for a long time, almost joined you at one point, which is great. It was the last conversation we had. The mission of the organization is kind of twofold, as you mentioned. So it's obviously to support the community through, efforts on the Hill and awareness and whatnot. But then also we've kind of found this niche space, I would say, by accident, I think, during the Afghan withdrawal, subsequently in Ukraine, and then most recently in Israel, where the government has inherently governmental functions that they have to perform. So, hostage rescue, military operations on one side, and on the other, State Department support for non-combatant evacuation operations. And in the middle, there's kind of a bit of a void where, citizens who find themselves trapped may need help navigating to a safe location, dealing with the bureaucracy, getting information from the outside, how to survive, in an environment like that where there's, combat going on around them. And we found some pretty effective techniques through the use of technology and some experience for how to safely navigate people, bring them to safe locations, ensure that they are, they're okay for the time being, evaluations, and also through, networks, and be able to bring supplies and things as necessary to kind of keep them safe while the government takes the action that's needed. And then in some cases, we're actually able to provide the means of transportation to leave, whether that be chartered flights or ground transportation.
So let me get this straight though. But in Israel, you guys are helping facilitate, or you have already, the American citizens who need to get out of Israel but can't. Is that inaccurate?
Yeah, so there's almost two different things going on in Israel. So in Israel, initially, there were folks, in Israel proper who had been stuck as a result of wherever they happened to be after the terrorist attack on 10/7, or commercial flights were, all booked up, right, and they were having trouble trying to figure out the bureaucracy for how to, get registered and then get on a State Department chartered flight to get American citizens out. And so that was one population that we definitely work to support and help, along with colleagues from Save Our Allies. And then separately from that, there's another population of American citizens who found themselves trapped in Gaza. And much like Afghanistan, right, there was single gate to get out. It's Rafah crossing to the south. And so there's a lot of military activity taking place inside of Gaza, kinetic shaping operations that the Israelis were conducting until, they moved with the ground force in to conduct the clearing to demilitarize Hamas, which was Prime Minister Netanyahu's stated goal. So in the interim, you had a lot of folks who were stuck, didn't know where to go, how to make sure that they were safe, informing, U.S. government officials where their locations were, any immediate medical needs, supply drops, those types of things, to be able to keep people safe and keep them in locations where they were away from the conflict area. And then assisting with their location, providing the information to the State Department, as well as registering them. Because at the end of the day, the State Department is the official entity that's responsible for U.S. citizens and ensuring that they can leave. And that's not something that we're not a replacement for government. We look at it as a force multiplier, right? So we're standing by and assisting, but without interfering in official government efforts.
So how does it work? I mean, how do you let people know? Because obviously the U.S. government wasn't doing anything for a while. How do you let people know, hey, we're an organization that can get you out? Or if you have a family member over there, we can help. Like, how do you guys get the word out so people know to turn to you?
Sure. So believe it or not, members of Congress come to us and let us know that things are going on. We've had members of the press that will let us know, say, hey, families have contacted us if people are trapped. Through efforts like that, and again, since we've done this in Afghanistan and Ukraine, you kind of develop a bit of a reputation for doing this line of work in general, and people reach out and say, hey,
does it just stop for a second? I don't mean to interrupt you, but I'm sitting here thinking to myself, does it not blow your mind as a former military official, civilian that dealt with that our government isn't doing what I would deem a basic function, and that we're basically, what you just said, where members of Congress are calling us to get their constituents out? Like, what the heck is going on that we as a government don't have the facilities and the capabilities to say, if you're trapped in a country, we'll get you out?
So I think in this case, right, if you're talking about being in a trapped area, it's either if you're held hostage, we obviously have counterterrorism forces responsible for hostage rescues, you're well aware. And then, the ability to conduct a non-combatant evacuation operation requires presence on the ground or the ability to operate. So the State Department obviously organized flights out of Israel, working through negotiations to get people out through Rafah Gate. So in the interim, while they're working those governmental functions for negotiations, we kind of, it was almost like case management. Like, we pick up folks who are there and say, hey, we can help you while you're there. Let us help you navigate. And it's not a function that government normally performs. It's a very strange gap in the scenes, is what I would call it, right? In terms of the things that are necessary. Because at the end of the day, state says, hey, let us know where you are. We'll contact you when we have information to provide you for how you need to get out and where you need to go. And, by the way, send us a copy of your passport. In the interim, in the middle of all that, people, what do I do now? How do I keep myself safe? Where do I go? How do I get supplies? How do I ensure people know where my physical location is? And so we're able to provide that case management type role to ensure that those types of things are taking place. And we have a lot of folks on the team who had worked or done training in Israel or worked alongside the Egyptians who had previously established relationships, which makes it very easy to then be able to liaise with them as well as with the special operations and intelligence community, because that's where we come from. So we're able to draw on that experience to be able to help provide that firsthand connection.
It's unbelievable that, like I said, I get it, but it's just, if it wasn't for you guys and what you're doing, and I know there's some other groups that did similar work in Afghanistan, but it's just, it is, I think, at its face, when you stop and think of what we're doing to help people who are coming into the country illegally. Like, we're going to make sure that we put them on a bus and we do all that.
Right.
But then when we have American citizens, we go, hey, let's call up Special Operations Association of America, and they'll get a charter flight over there.
Yeah, I mean, it's been definitely an interesting experience. There's a couple other groups that had flights come out of Israel as well, and we've all kind of worked together in the space. I mean, there's only so many people who kind of do this line of work. It's a labor of love. It's fellow citizens. We're paid to get trained in different capacities. There are different people within the organizations, intelligence, special operations, people in civilian capacities, whatever. Bring whatever we have to the table, and we feel we have that obligation to fellow citizens. And as long as we don't cross and get into official government lanes, and we've been working well together. I have to say, state and DoD have worked extremely well with us through this crisis as well. So we've been pretty fortunate.
So I know in a previous life you were on a senior member of the White House hostage policy review team.
Yep.
Take me inside what would be the government's thinking about how we're addressing the current hostages that Hamas has taken. What is the goal?
Sure.
How is it different because it's not a state actor? This isn't Russia or North Korea or whatever. This is a terrorist organization. So how do we look at them, and what is our government doing on the backside that we might not be aware of?
That's a great question. So one of the things that we had out of the 2015 hostage policy review that we created is the special envoy for hostage affairs, the presidential special envoy, that is, which is Roger Carson's former Green Beret. Great guy, carryover from the previous administration, really knows what he's doing, and his team is really dedicated. And then also the Hostage Recovery Fusion Cell, which is an interagency intelligence cell meant to share information regarding the hostages, right? So the bureaucracy that was needed was created in terms of intelligence sharing. A person whose responsibility is to negotiate over these matters, who's well trained, is in place. And so when the government looks at these situations, this is probably, by the way, the most complicated case I've ever seen in my career. I mean, I had oversight for policy and operations, at the Pentagon. I wasn't a tier one operator by any means. It's not my background. But having oversight for operations and policy, there's 200 hostages. They were taken from all over southern Israel. So this was clearly a purposeful act. Right, this wasn't like some random cell leader said, "Hey, we're done with the raping and pillaging and murdering. Let's just grab the extra people that are left." This was a direction ahead of time, which tells us a couple things: that Hamas knew this attack was at least designed to be spectacular in size and its effects that it delivered to try to achieve their political ends, which is the definition for terrorism, right? Politically motivated violence against civilians. So this was in fact a terrorist attack, and their policy goal that they've always been trying to achieve is a two-state solution where they don't recognize Israel and Hamas has their own Palestinian state that they're responsible for. Unlike the other groups that have renounced terrorism in pursuit of that objective, Hamas never did, and when they broke from the Muslim Brotherhood in '87. So you have a terrorist group, but they're also a quasi-state actor because they've been allowed to administer Gaza in a population of 2 million people for over a decade, right? I mean, they're in charge. They're running all the ministries, the hospitals, everything else. So it's a very bizarre scenario in that regard, much like the Taliban coming back into power now, right? Is this an unlawful state detention? Is this in the Taliban case for imprisoning people, or is this a hostage taking? In the Hamas case, it's very clearly hostage taking.
Right.
They've taken civilians, holding them against their will, who did not commit any crimes, and they're looking for something in return. So we know that they're trying to use them as leverage, and they're trying to do that because they're trying to mitigate Israel's military advantage. So you really have two choices, right? It's either a negotiated settlement or you have some type of rescue operation. With a population of 200, what's come out is that not only did 2,500 Hamas fighters cross the border in Israel to capture these people, but behind them in the fence were these series of criminals and other people who followed them and that wanted to get in on the action, and they started taking their own hostages as well. So you've got people being held by multiple different groups. It's not just Hamas. A population of over 200 being held in a densely populated urban environment. It's not the most densely populated. It's not top 25. There's often a misnomer about Gaza, but it's dense. And there's a threat from RPGs, potential shoulder-fired missiles, SA-7s, those types of things, right? And then you have, small arms fire. You don't want to end up with a Black Hawk Down scenario. You have no ability to do Casevac or medevac inside the area. And so you're really limited to a large ground force coming in, because how are you going to conduct simultaneous clandestine hostage rescue operations with a population of 200 dispersed all over the place with a tunnel system that's 500 kilometers long with 50 to 100, not tunnels, complexes all over. Gaza's like an ant farm. So from a rescue perspective, it makes, big rescue operations virtually impossible. And that's why we've been seeing protracted negotiations for over a month, because that's really the only way to solve the situation.
So the bottom line is it's not one entity that's holding them. It's several, and they're trying to figure out, this guy's got 40 and this guy's got 20, or onesies and twosies?
No, it's a great question. And that sounds about right. I'm no longer in government, so I don't have access to classified, but from what I've been reading and talking to people, that sounds like that's exactly what's happening. There's multiple groups. We do know from the first two elderly ladies who were released that they were initially brought in the tunnels on, motorcycles. They were in a group of 25, and then they were broken up into smaller groups. So if you take the population, and even if it's 5, right, and you've got 225, you've got groups of 5 all over the place if there's that many being held together. So these hostages are dispersed all over the place.
So let's go back to what I was asking. For strategically, is the U.S. position based on what you just described? Hey, we've got to negotiate for these folks one by one. Is that it? And that this strategic pause that the Biden administration is pushing for is an attempt to have Qatar come in and I'm still trying to figure out what are the next steps? Like, what is going on the U.S. government side? Is it, hey, we'll pay you cash? What are we looking to do? Because it seems to me, based on what you're describing, it's not one person holding 200. It's disparate groups, and you've got to figure out what you're dealing with first and foremost.
No, so the goal is obviously to try to get the entire population out at once, right? You want to get as many of the hostages out as you can at one time, specifically for the reason you said, because you don't want the slow drip. One, it increases risk over time to the hostages that are there. If there's a health issue or something else, there's an active military campaign that's going on. But Hamas also knows that, which is why they're only releasing in small drips, because they want to try to get as much out of this as possible. And they're doing it to mitigate the advantages Israel has of, armor, artillery, and air support, which they don't have. Same reason they're going to use IEDs. There was a factory discovered the other day, and TTPs that were developed against the United States, by other Shia-backed militias. That case in Iraq. So no, they're going to negotiate to try to get as many out as possible. And yes, it's that trilateral negotiation, right, to try to get the hostages back. And then you want to find out if they actually have everybody. So the first test is, you want to make sure who you're negotiating with actually has the authority to release people. And because there were a couple of folks who were released, we know at least who they're talking to do have the power and authority over those holding folks to get them out. So that's the first thing. And then, as you mentioned, it's the intelligence picture. Do we know where everybody is, and do we know who's all holding them? And that's the first thing you have to figure out. So the size of this population, the fact that it's multiple groups and they're dispersed all over the place, makes this one of the most complex hostage situations I've ever seen or read about.
Yeah. So what if you had to put chances on it based on your expertise? I mean, do we stand a pretty good chance of getting these folks back? And secondly, do you think that this pause makes sense? There's a lot of criticism of the Biden administration for advocating for a pause because it just gives Hamas time to regroup. And people are saying, well, how do we know that they're going to keep their word and let hostages out if we do give this pause?
Right. So some of it is a trust building measure, right? Like, hey, for an agreement for a tactical pause, if that's in fact what they're asking for on the battlefield in a particular area, we expect to see a release of hostages that are there. So that is one reason that you would want to do that. Yes, they get out safe. But also, the other reason under the law of armed conflict, you do still have people that are in the battlefield up north, despite Israel making it very clear that they need to leave, dropping leaflets, WhatsApp messages, texts, phone calls, everything in public pronouncements. So clearing the civilians off the battlefield helps because, I still believe that the biggest Achilles heel to the operation for the Israelis is public sentiment in the Arab world and worldwide, for that matter, in response to, civilian casualties that are there. They have an obligation to demilitarize Hamas and ensure that they're never able to conduct an attack like that again. And, the images that are coming out and the humanitarian situation will sort of undermine their ability to get support for the operation worldwide. So it's beneficial for Israel to have these pauses, to clear these civilians off the battlefield and give them freedom of maneuver to operate. And that way they can, really take the fight to the terrorists, just like we did in Fallujah. And then, when I fought in Sadr City in 2008.
Interesting. As I said, we're observing Veterans Day today. I want to just switch gears for a second and ask you
Sure.
two questions. One is, the Republican debate was this week, and they asked, Hugh Hewitt was asking about the size of the Navy, how much of a ship, how big should our Navy be in terms of vis-a-vis China, et cetera. Do you think that our military now, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, Space Force, do we have the capability to take on China, to deter China? Are we falling behind, or do we have what it takes to win still?
I think the deputy secretary announced a program called Replicator that was supposed to, field tens of thousands of autonomous vehicles, both ground and maritime, over the next 18 to 24 months, which I think was a pretty clear message to China that we're trying to get ahead of any potential conflict that could arise in a South China Sea contingency, whether that be Taiwan or otherwise. Because I don't think that that the Chinese are waiting around on our acquisition cycle and our ability to do 60-month studies to go look at whether the bathrooms are appropriate on a littoral combat ship. They don't care. And so I think the size of the Navy is obviously of concern, ensuring that we have enough ships to be able to mitigate that potential threat. And more importantly, serve as deterrence is a big concern. And China has been a proponent of stealing corporate proprietary data theft for all kinds of reasons, whether it be banking secrets, but also from the defense community.
Right.
And so they have increased the size of their military spending budget significantly, and they are becoming more of a global superpower. And people, I make that comment, people say, well, they're already a superpower. Yes, they are an economic superpower while they're out there, but there's elements of power, as you and I well know from time in government: diplomatic, information, military, and economic. They are trying to get all of those online to where they would be competitive across the board as part of what they call their 2049 plan. But in the next couple of years, they will achieve the military levels that they need to be able to conduct an attack like against Taiwan or elsewhere. And we have a lot of catching up to do to ensure that we are prepared for that, but also, more importantly, as you mentioned, to deter it. And no, we are not there.
Yeah, I wish more Americans understood that point, because the way that China is going and the provocative nature that they operate in the South China Sea, I don't think enough people see. Last thing I want to ask you is, you look at the Army, the Navy, the Air Force. They all miss their recruiting goals. The only service branch to meet recruiting goals is the Marine Corps. And they've stuck with a very tough brand, the Proud of the Marines. People want to, if you want to join the Marines, you know what you're getting. And it was funny, I was listening to some interview and the guy said, we hand out enlistment bonuses and all these other things to folks to get in. And some of the things are working and some of the things are not working. What do you get if you join the Marines? And he goes, you get to be a Marine. And I just thought that they get their brand. But why do you think the other service branches are missing their recruiting goals? Is it woke culture? Is it that a lack of wanting to serve the country? Is it more money? What are you hearing when you talk to younger folks?
I think it's a combination of all that, to be honest with you. Yeah. So I think, a lot of the policies you just mentioned, that's, being described as the woke culture, in terms of what's being instituted. There is some of that pushback that's coming in. There's societal pushback against that in general terms. So that's one of the causal factors. Both, the wars have stopped, right? So a lot of people enlisted, and so did I for that matter, and you joined up as well after 9/11. Those days are coming to a close. We also have a population that has been, getting more obese and less in shape. I forget the number of people actually eligible to join is smaller than it's ever been. And there's that seems to be this lack of desire to join and service towards the country. And I don't know if that's a reflection of civics or our national politics. But you stick all that together and you get a group of people who couldn't be bothered. And that is a serious concern from a national security perspective that's got to be changed. And each one of those areas has to be looked at. Yeah,
I agree. It's upsetting to me, because one of the greatest statistics that I've seen that is cause for concerns is one of the greatest sources of people was people whose family had served. And you're now seeing that drop. And people who have served aren't telling their kids, I don't think this is where you should go anymore. And that should be the big telltale sign.
Yeah, it is a problem, because if you don't recognize the service that you joined for the benefits and reasons why you did, still being reflective of your decision making at the time, it makes you question, is that an environment that you want to have your kids serve in? And so that being espoused by veterans is a very dangerous thing. I think you're 100% right, Sean.
All right. Alex, thanks for being with us. Happy Veterans Day. Thanks for what you've done, your service, but also what Special Operations of Association of America is continuing to do to serve so many citizens throughout the world. I appreciate it. And thank you for being with us.
You too, Sean. Thanks so much for having me.
You bet. All right, folks, thanks for being with us. What a great show to wrap up the week. As I said, a lot to break down next week. Jill Stein jumping in that Green Party campaign for president that will help Trump. Obviously, a lot more to break down with you as far as where that stands, what's going on in the race for president, plus Trump's legal troubles. And on Monday, we'll have 5 days until the government shuts down. So a lot to get to. As always, thank you for subscribing and sharing. Please do that. Sign up on YouTube and Rumble. Give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. If you want to text me, 571-441-4991. Have a great weekend. We'll see you back here on Monday on The Sean Spicer Show. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.